It's that time of the programme to go through all the stories making the front pages on the papers and also delve inside them too. Let's see what's making the headlines in our paper review, joined by a member of Patriotic Millionaires and an angel investor, Julia Davies. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in again. Let's get through. There's all sorts of stories to get through this morning. Just sort of a few of the front pages, I think, just picked up on Sky News' interview with Sir Jim Ratcliffe yesterday with our economics and data editor, Ed Conway. And Sir Jim's saying this phrase that the UK, from his perspective, was being colonised by migrants. And it's a story that's there on the front page of the Express, on the front page of the Star, on the front page of the Mirror as well. The Mirror saying shameful in pretty bold capital letters. A lot of political reaction to that as well, kind of understandably.
Well, it says it in a word how I would react to that, shameful, because this is a man that has a worth of estimated about £12.6 billion. So let's just remember what that is. That's £12,600 million that this man has, and he chooses not to pay tax in this country, and then he has the cheek to complain about what's happening in this country. I'm sorry, but if you have that level of money, if you want to talk about what's happening in this country, then pay your tax here. And how dare you, someone with that level of wealth, suggest that our problems are down to people who, you know, who have come to this country because they are fleeing something. You know, whatever it is, they've come to this country to help, you know, to make a better life for themselves, but also to contribute. So, you know, he owns a football team which is predominantly made up of immigrants. You know, he's an immigrant himself. He decided to migrate to Monaco because he didn't want to contribute to public services in the UK. So I really don't think we should be giving this person any time whatsoever until he shows that he actually cares about this country and pays tax in this country, which he, you know, chooses to criticise.
And I'm sure, you know, INEOS, massive petrochemical kind of chemicals company, I'm sure there are people here in the company that probably have come from another country that also work for him as well. So it's a very conflicted comment, one surely must argue. But at the same time, I'm sure there are people that will be reading some of the front pages who will, to some degree, agree, which is then the challenge for wider society.
But do they agree because they're constantly being told by these billionaires who, let's face it, you know, are getting to disproportionately get their views across, are telling them that the problem is these people, rather than the people who are saying that, who are the ones that are choosing not to contribute to the society which enabled them to make their wealth. So let's just remember that if you have the level of wealth that Jim Ratcliffe has, you could contribute vastly to public services in the UK, which would make life better for the very people who are struggling right now, for the very people in communities which really, quite rightly, feel that they've been forgotten about and they've been left behind. You know, they've got kids in schools where, you know, there isn't enough teaching, there isn't enough support for, you know, the kids that are struggling, pensioners who are, you know, not getting the health care or the care that they need. This is a man who could sort a lot of that out if he just chose to pay tax in this country that he's choosing to criticise, rather than, you know, just put his own personal wealth above everything else and then choose to criticise other people.
I'm sure if he was here, he would say, well, look, some of my companies that are based here pay tax. Of course, we're referring to his own personal tax affairs, aren't we, when we're talking about him paying tax. And, of course, you talk about public services. NHS, for example, underpinned by people who weren't born in the UK but provide a service that we all love and rely on a daily basis. It's a story that's on a lot of the front pages. It's going to be a story that's going to rumble on in politics as well. The Prime Minister saying that he's got to apologise. Nigel Farage taking a slightly different tack on that. But I want to also get through some of the day's other stories. Let's just talk about a story about holiday tax. What's this?
Well, that's quite an interesting story, and you know, it resonates with me because I live in a holiday town, and this is focused on the suggestion that a sort of small charge could be added to accommodation, you know. And most people that has travelled in Europe or around the world will be quite familiar with this. So there's lots of places around the world where when you stay in a hotel...
Go to Europe, it's often the case.
Yeah, there's a small tax, and you can understand why that happens. You know, living in Bournemouth myself, I can understand that, you know, it costs a lot of money to host lots of holiday makers, and of course that supports businesses as well. But I think the real story about holiday, you know, businesses in the UK is that they are significantly struggling. So there was a recent report out by the New Economics Foundation that just says that domestic tourism is in a massive slide. And what's the real reason for that? Well, I would say the real reason for that is, bizarrely, as a nation, we subsidise people holidaying abroad at the cost of our own holiday sector. You know, so the holiday sector in the UK represents a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. So that story focused on big chains. Well, think about all of those small businesses, you know, the B&Bs, the restaurants, the cafes, the people that are running sort of, you know, like water sports services, etc., on our beaches. They are really struggling, and they're trying to compete with people going off on fairly cheap foreign holidays because we subsidise flying people to have holidays abroad, and we're not supporting our domestic tourism. So don't forget, there's no tax on flying fuel at all. You know, we tax when people sort of get in their car to go to work.
Landing fees and landing taxes, though.
Yeah, and there's no VAT. So, you know, so you go and stay in a B&B, a little B&B, small business in the UK, then you're paying VAT. You know, if you, you know, get a taxi in the UK, the taxi company, they're paying VAT. But you fly to take your holiday business out of Britain against the interests of our British holiday companies, and you're being subsidised. So we are subsidising airport expansion to take even more holiday makers out of the UK, and at the same time, we're just saying, why, you know, we're shocking and saying, you know, why are holiday businesses in the UK struggling? Well,
or seaside towns that have seen kind of degeneration over the course of years, and then attempts to try and reverse that and drawing people back in again. And this is the point that's been made. It's an article in the Daily Telegraph. The point that's being made by 200 UK companies that includes Butlins, Whitbread, Travelodge, saying that the tourist tax would add more than £100 to the cost of a family break.
Yes, potentially that would, but let's look at the real reason why people aren't holiday in the UK, and I would say it's because we're subsidising holidays outside of the UK. And also, we've got to look at our taxation overall. So a lot of these small to medium-sized businesses within the holiday sector, they're employing a lot of staff, so they're significantly affected by the increase in employers' national insurance that was implemented as an alternative to taxing these big chain companies a bit more, and also taxing wealth a bit more. So, you know, I've always got to get that in.
You did on Sir Jim as well. Let's move on to the front page of The Guardian. Just an article there, select female deputy to end boys' club in number 10, the Prime Minister has told. And this is a call from Harriet Harman, which I think we can describe as a Labour grandee. She has been a central part of the party for a long time now, and has urged Sir Keir to revive the role of First Secretary of State, post previously actually occupied by Peter Mandelson under Gordon Brown. But it's what she would say would bring about a culture change and an end to the number 10 boys' club. This was all during a meeting of the Women's Parliamentary Party, Labour Parliamentary Party, female members of it, in Westminster yesterday. And I have it from some sources in Westminster. This is the first time that Sir Keir has actually met with a female PLP. Now, he met with the wider Parliamentary Labour Party on Monday, but they've never actually had a face-to-face meeting with this group. And, you know, we've kind of seen... We see toxic cultures in workplaces all of the time, don't we? And we see boys' clubs cultures in workplaces all of the time. And we'd like to think we've got rid of it, but we haven't, let's be honest. And so this is the call from Harriet Harman, and she says it would be really powerful if the role was given to a woman, and said fighting misogyny should be the 6th mission of the Starmer government. I'm sure many people would agree with that. Absolutely,
because what we really see through this whole Epstein saga, which is going on, is that we have got this culture where women are being treated as just things to be traded, you know, things to be utilised by the extremely wealthy men in society who have just felt that, you know, their privilege means that they can just treat these women as objects. And so I think we do need a very powerful move now to show that this is being taken seriously. So absolutely, I think this is the kind of thing that's needed.
And you know, time after time, in all of the time we're covering these stories, who are we focusing on? Well, it's the people that are either alleged or linked to the terrible wrongs that have happened, or Epstein himself. I've yet to see many front pages that have pictures or stories of the victims. Now, of course, they might not want to talk out publicly, but we also do need to focus on the people that have been the victims in all of this. And I'm looking at some of the front pages. There's very little coverage of that. It's all about the men behind it again. And you mustn't overlook that, I appreciate.
But is it, though? And again, we're talking about, you know, we keep talking about underage women, but these were girls. You know, girls. We really need to talk about this, that they were girls who were abused by these men. And actually, we're only talking about a few of the men. There were vast numbers of hugely wealthy and influential men that were involved in this, many of whom are just getting on with what they're doing, getting on with, again, utilising their privilege to get away with whatever. And, you know, why is that the case? Why are we still allowing this to happen? So I think we need to ask some very, very serious questions about how we address this going forward, and make sure that not just a handful of these men that were involved in exploiting these girls, but we look at all of them. And we actually need action to be taken, because what action has been taken so far? We have one woman that, as far as I'm aware, is in prison as a result of this, massive crime ring.
Yeah, and then that remarkable footage of her, invoking a Fifth Amendment right to not even then give any evidence. Now, she has that right, understandably, but for victims, not only of this scandal, but for other scandals. So I'm sure we're looking at this and going, look, it's the same thing happening again and again.
Yes.
Surely massively, I don't know what word to use, gut-wrenching, triggering, heartbreaking that someone that could provide more information she has the right to do so, but has chosen not to do so. That must be awful.
Absolutely. But again, we've got to come back to all of these men that have been involved in this, and there is information about that, and they are just still getting on with their lives, and they're not actually being pursued. So we really need to think about that, about why that is allowed to happen. Why are we continuing to allow these very wealthy, very powerful men to get away with abusing girls, which happened on a huge scale, and it's now all over the news, but still, what action is actually being taken about that?
We were going to talk about the weather. We were going to talk about Greenland and the Winter Olympics and the cheating by athletes. We were going to talk about FM radio, but we don't have any time because those stories are so important and require time. So well, there's plenty more on all the day's top stories on Sky News as well. But, we were going to do more, but we can't. But it's great to have you with us. Julia, lovely to have you again. Good to have you with us as well. All the day's top stories are coming up on Mornings with Ridge and Frost. Also, the Cheat Sheet podcast brings it all together for you as well. Download it wherever you typically get your podcasts. Do stick with us. All the headlines coming up next.